Ever wish you could read minds?
Well, not in a creepy way.
Right. Yeah, more like, wouldn't it be helpful to kind of get what's really motivating someone? Or maybe even like see through a tiny white lie here and there.
I see where you're going with this.
Well, get ready,
Oh,
because today we're taking a deep dive into all things mind reading.
okay. Sounds intriguing.
It really is. And, going through your notes and articles on this, it's obvious you're really into the psychology of it all, which is awesome.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's just fascinating how much we communicate without even realizing it, you know?
Exactly. Like how our words, our body language, even our pupils can actually give us away.
Yeah, it's like we're broadcasting all the time, even when we don't mean to.
100%.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, let's be totally clear.
I'm on it.
This isn't about, like, actual telepathy or anything.
No mind control happening here.
Haha. No, definitely not. We're not going to tune you into Professor X.
Although that would make for a very different kind of deep dive.
Do it seriously.
Yeah.
But really, what we're talking about today is all about those real-world tactics, those subtle signals. The kind of stuff people do without even thinking about it.
Right, those little unconscious giveaways.
Exactly. Recognizing those patterns, those tiny tells, that's what can really help us understand what's really going on beneath the surface.
I like it. So where do we start?
Well, one of the books you sent over, Henrik Fexeus' The Art of Reading Minds, it really digs into this whole mind-body connection.
Okay, the mind-body connection, always a fascinating topic.
Totally. And you know how we're always told to separate the two?
Yeah, separate the mind and body, keep them distinct.
Right. Well, Fexeus is like, nope, they're
Mm-hmm.
totally intertwined. Can't have one without the other.
And, he makes a really compelling case. There's this super interesting exercise in the book. Basically, he has you clench your jaw.
Clench your jaw. Okay.
Furrow your brows.
Like I'm angry.
Exactly. Then stare straight ahead, make fists with your hands, and hold that for a good 10 seconds.
I actually remember trying this. It sounds kind of strange when you describe it.
It does. It does. But, I always encourage people, try it out for yourself. See how it makes you feel.
I have to admit, I was expecting to feel, I don't know, maybe powerful.
Interesting.
But honestly, I just ended up feeling sort of tense, kind of grumpy, actually.
And that's exactly the point. See, you were mirroring the physical expression of anger, even though you weren't actually feeling angry at that moment.
So my body thought I was mad, even though my head wasn't there yet.
Exactly. Your body doesn't know the difference. And that's precisely what Fexeus is getting at here. Our physical state directly impacts our mental and emotional states and vice versa. It's a two-way street.
Okay, so it's like our body betrays our feelings even when we're trying to keep a poker face.
Exactly. We're talking mood rings, basically.
Haha, I love that. Okay, that's super interesting and kind of funny to think about. But why does any of this matter in everyday life?
Well, think of it this way. Understanding this whole mind-body connection, it's like learning the ABCs of body language. It's the foundation for everything else. And that brings us to another really powerful concept Fexeus talks about. Rapport.
Okay, rapport. The key to, like, acing that job interview.
Oh, absolutely. Or finally getting your toddler to eat their vegetables.
Or maybe even convincing someone to, like, finally take out the trash, right?
You got it. It's powerful stuff.
But it's not just about being nice, though, right?
You're right. It's so much deeper than that. Rapport, it's really about establishing trust, genuine connection. It's about signaling to someone's unconscious, hey, we're on the same wavelength here. You're good. You're safe with me.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So how do we actually DO that? What's the, like, secret sauce of instant rapport? Give me the cheat code.
All right, well, get ready for it. Mirroring.
Mirroring. Like, I shouldn't directly copy if someone starts doing the robot in the middle of a meeting, right?
Probably not the best strategy, no? Think of it more as subtly matching someone's energy, their rhythm.
Okay, subtle mirroring. I can work with that.
Yeah, it could be their posture, their tone of voice, even how fast they're breathing. It's like you're speaking their unconscious language.
So if someone's leaning back, talking slowly, maybe I shouldn't be bouncing off the walls like I just chugged 3 espressos.
Exactly. You're catching on quickly. You've got it. And actually, another one of the sources you shared, Elena Zuckers, she talks about how effective this can be in high-stakes situations. Like, think job interviews or even when you're dealing with someone who's being difficult.
Oh, man. That reminds me of this one time I was trying to get my neighbor to stop parking on my lawn. Maybe a little mirroring would have helped there. But you know what? We'll save that story for another time. For now, we're diving even deeper into the art of reading minds.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the mind-body connection and the power of rapport. But now I want to talk about something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie.
Okay, what's that?
Pupil dilation.
Pupil dilation.
Yeah. So you actually have a note here about how, like, ancient jade merchants would use soot
Oh, yeah.
to try and, like, hide their pupils when they were
Mhm.
negotiating prices.
Sorry.
What is the deal with that?
Well, they were basically just trying to conceal their tells, right? Because when you think about it, I mean, our pupils, they're like these tiny little
It's kind
windows.
of creepy when you think about it.
It is a little bit,
And, like,
yeah.
I don't want people looking at my pupils and being like, oh, I know what they're thinking.
Right. Well, they do dilate when we're interested in
Oh.
something, when we're excited about something, or even, if we're aroused by something. They can also dilate when we're just trying to process something that's really complicated or difficult.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very sort of primal response.
It is so interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you can't control it.
No.
It's just your body, like, reacting to stimulus.
Exactly.
And, I mean, speaking of, like, masking tells and stuff,
Yeah.
this reminds me of, poker players who are always wearing those sunglasses.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those are iconic for a reason.
Right, exactly. Because they're trying to, I don't know, be sneaky, I guess.
They are. They're trying to hide those tells.
Yeah.
Because those micro expressions
Yes.
can be very revealing. And this is something that Paul Ekman, who we've talked about,
Oh, yeah, Ekman and his guy.
he's a legend in this world of, studying emotions, studying facial expressions.
Mm.
He really pioneered a lot of this research
He really did.
on micro expressions and how, our faces can betray us in just a matter of milliseconds.
Yeah, you can't even think fast enough
You can't even control
to,
them.
like, stop your face from doing those things.
Exactly. And so those tiny little movements can really reveal what we're truly feeling, even when our words might be saying something different.
Totally, totally. And, it's funny because with pupil dilation, like, we might not consciously register it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if I'm looking at you and your pupils are dilated,
Right.
I'm not necessarily going to be like, oh, your pupils are dilated.
Exactly. You're not consciously thinking about it, but your brain is picking up on it.
Right. It's so bizarre.
It's like this hidden language. And it makes you wonder, how much are we actually missing in our day-to-day interactions? Because there's so much information that's being conveyed below the surface.
That is so true. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I want to shift gears just a little bit here
Okay.
and talk about lies.
Ooh, good one.
Because you've got a bunch of notes in here on deception detection.
Right.
And, it's funny. One of the things that Fexeus talks about is how he would analyze phone conversations
Interesting.
to try and figure out who someone was really talking to on the other end of the line.
I see.
And it got me thinking, I think we've all been in those situations where we're like, I wonder if this person's, being totally honest with me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've all been there.
So what are the signs? How can we
Yeah.
tell if someone's trying to, like, pull the wool over our eyes?
Well, one really key concept when it comes to deception is what's called leakage.
Leakage.
Leakage, and essentially what this means is it's like those unconscious tells that sort of contradict what someone is actually saying.
Okay, so like a really quick example of that.
Yeah,
If I was like, oh my God, I love that new haircut,
right.
but my face, like, for a split second,
Uh-huh.
does like a full-on grimace,
Yeah.
is that leakage?
That's a perfect example of leakage because your words are saying one thing,
Right.
but your body language is saying something totally different.
It's like betraying you.
Exactly. And so it's these little inconsistencies that we're looking for.
But it's funny. I feel like some people are just naturally really expressive.
Oh, absolutely. Some people are just more animated, more expressive than others.
And then on the flip side, some people are just really good liars.
That's true, too.
Like, what do you even do with that?
Well, and that's why it's so important to remember that this isn't like, an exact science.
Oh, for sure.
It's not foolproof. There's no magic formula.
Yeah.
But it's really about paying attention to those deviations from someone's baseline behavior. So what's their normal demeanor like? Are they usually pretty reserved, pretty stoic?
Okay.
Or are they super animated and expressive? And then when you start to see these inconsistencies, like, wait a minute, they're acting a little bit differently than they normally do.
That's when you know that something might be up.
Exactly. That's when those alarm bells might start going off in your head.
This reminds me of that story that Fexeus tells about the woman who was, like, totally flirting with him.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story.
Even though she didn't even seem to realize it herself.
Right.
Like, he was picking up on these subtle cues from her body language.
Yeah.
Like, a little touch on the arm, the way she was angling her body towards him.
Right, yeah.
Things that she wasn't even consciously aware of, which I think is fascinating.
It is fascinating. It really highlights how much our bodies are communicating all the time, even when we have no idea it's happening.
Right. And it's like, who's really in control then?
That's a great question.
Because if our bodies are doing all this stuff without us even knowing,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, are we really the ones making the decisions? I don't know. This is all getting a little too deep for me.
Well, that's the thing about this topic. It can get a little uncomfortable, right?
It really can.
Because we all like to think we're in the driver's seat making these rational decisions.
Right.
But the truth is, our subconscious minds are constantly at work. They're picking up on these cues, they're forming impressions,
Yeah.
and they're often influencing our actions in ways that we don't even realize.
So are we all just like walking around sending out these signals like little unconscious beacons?
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Like how much of our behavior is actually within our control?
Right. It's like we like to think we're calling the shots, making all these rational decisions. But
Right.
then you start digging into this stuff and it's like, wait a minute.
It makes you question everything.
Exactly. And that's the thing, our subconscious minds, they're always working, even when we're not aware of it.
Always working in the background.
Yeah, picking up on all these subtle cues, forming impressions.
Forming impressions, exactly.
And ultimately, influencing our actions in ways that we might not even realize.
It can be a little unnerving when you really think about it.
It is. It's like, how much free will do we really have?
Right. Are we making our own choices or are we just puppets of our subconscious?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember just because our subconscious is powerful doesn't mean we're powerless.
Okay, so like what can we actually do about it? How do we tap into that subconscious wisdom, but like without letting it completely run the show?
That's the key, right? Finding that balance. And it starts with awareness. Fexeus has that great example of how negations can backfire.
Oh yeah, tell me about that.
Okay, so if I tell you don't think of a giant plate of spaghetti, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Spaghetti, obviously.
Exactly. Our brains can't help but focus on the image, even if we're telling ourselves not to.
That's so wild. So like if we're constantly saying don't mess this up
Right.
or don't be so awkward, we're basically setting ourselves up to do exactly that.
You got it.
Okay, so what's the solution? Are we all destined to be ruled by stray spaghetti thoughts?
Definitely not. It's all about reframing our thinking. So instead of dwelling on what we don't want to happen, focus on the desired outcome.
Okay, so instead of don't be awkward,
Right.
try be confident, be engaging, like that.
Exactly. It's like that saying, what you focus on expands. Right.
Right.
And this applies to our thoughts, too. You've got a note in here about embedded commands, which is another great example of this.
Oh yeah, embedded commands.
So Fexeus talks about how even subtle repetition can plant these suggestions in our minds. Like, imagine someone keeps saying, you look tired. Even if it's framed as just an observation, hearing it over and over, it can actually make you start to feel more tired.
It's kind of scary how powerful our words can be.
They really are. Both the words we say to ourselves and the words that other people say to us.
This is also fascinating, but you know what's really striking me?
What's that?
This whole mind reading thing, it's not just about understanding other people, right?
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves, our own mind.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from all of this.
Yeah, becoming more aware of those subtle influences, both internal and external.
It's about becoming a more conscious participant in our own lives. Choosing how we want to respond to those unconscious cues, how we frame our thoughts, and ultimately how we show up in the world.
Okay, so it's less about like controlling every single thought and
Yeah.
more about just being aware of them
Exactly.
and making, I guess, more intentional choices.
Precisely. And the more we understand these subtle dynamics, the more agency we have, the more empowered we become.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been amazing.
It's been a good one.
I feel like my mind is officially blown.
Mission accomplished.
Seriously. We started off talking about wishing we could read minds.
Right.
And now it's like we actually have a lot more access to that hidden world than we realize.
It's all there, waiting to be observed, waiting to be understood.
So as we wrap up here, what's like the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from this whole conversation?
More than anything, just pay attention. To yourself, to others. Notice those little details, the subtle cues, the inconsistencies. Question your assumptions, and above all, stay curious about the incredible complexity of human behavior.
I love it. No crystal ball required.